So unless you see all the fiscals and all the plans laid out so we can understand them, it'd be silly to comment.
It's in the budget.
In whose budget?
In the government budget. I mean, do you think...
Well, I thought you told me it was the National Party that released the plan.
Yes.
So you're talking about you're talking about a Labour Party budget, a National Party plan today. What are you talking about?
The National Party's plan, it wants to spend less comparative to previous government budgets, so to slowly reduce government spending.
Well, if you can find savings where the system brings about greater productivity, fine. But let us have it all laid out so that people can understand it, including economists. And thus far, there's a lot of questions that are still being unanswered.
What are those questions?
Well, if you start with a 750 per year plan, and there's a 500 million hole in it each year, or 2.1 billion shortage after 4 years, then maybe you need to explain to people what do you mean.
You mentioned in there, did you text recipients that you might publicly release the coalition negotiations?
No, I went through a journalist. He had said this to a journalist, and I said to the journalist, go on, call him up, tell him, Mr. Peters challenged you, free him up to release the text, and we'll see who's telling the truth here. So about who was in charge, who invented, whose policy it was to have the Provincial Growth Fund. He got up there yesterday, and for the first time in 6 years, he claimed that he wasn't, that Labor was in charge. Let me tell you, he wasn't even in the room. He wasn't even in the negotiation room.
Have you had a chat to Robert Ballantyne about his comments?
No, I haven't. Because Robert Ballantyne is saying something that co-governance is a disease, it's a virus. And it is. And you woke journalists are not going to win this campaign, standing around unjustifiable, with an unjustifiable argument where 95% of the people believe us on this issue.
So just on the wording, New Zealand First has the courage to cut out your disease and bury you permanently. Have you said that?
Co-governance is a disease. I've said it before, over and over again. I'm very pleased that you're listening.
They're not very nice words.
Well, so it's your judgment now. Tell me, we have a democracy. Is your voice going to be prevailing over the voice of 2.5 million people? Is that how it goes? I think not.
Mr. Peters, on climate change, you said in there, you mentioned that carbon dioxide accounts for 0.04% of the atmosphere. Where do you get the 3% figure from in terms of human contribution to that?
We've got somebody now is arguing about the basic science. Excuse me, I'm not going to answer trivial. Kindergarten, I'm not interested in kindergarten. I'm not interested in kindergarten type questions. Truly. No, I'm sorry. No, it isn't.
Where do you get the 3% from?
I get it from experts internationally. And if you want me to do all your homework, put me on a payroll.
What experts, Mr. Peters?
Well, no, look, don't ask me silly questions. Next one, over you. Had enough of that.
Yeah, thanks.
You go and tell RNZ, corrupt as you are, you're not going to win this campaign. Huh?
Well, I was looking in the mirror for a minute, but that's all right. So, what do you make of the collective statement from supposedly 17 Maori leaders calling out racism from Bob Ballantyne?
Look, this is an assumed authority from on high with no democratic pretension or authority whatsoever. And we're not going to pay attention to some people who think that their assumed privilege against the massive interest of Maori will prevail.
So do you think you have a responsibility to call out racism and race baiting?
Yes, I do. And that's what they're doing. They've been race baiting for years, these elite Maori, and I'm calling them out.
On advance voting, Mr. Peters.
Can I just finish?
I'll go through this, then you can pick that.
Yeah, you know.
Because I don't have that much.
We want to hear both sides of the story.
Tuku Morgan used to be New Zealand First MP. In the big sweep you had. What's your reaction to Tuku's comments?
Well, with the greatest respect, Tuku was never my brightest MP, and he assumed a certain intellectual authority he never had.
So what's your relationship with Tuku then? Not that good?
Well, he's not listening, and that's why he's, still living off the Tainui back. He's not productive, he's living off the Tainui's back. Does that sound familiar?
So is the ACT Party, do you think, race baiting?
Well, look, why don't you ask the ACT Party? I'm here to talk about the party called New Zealand First. When will you guys get it in this campaign that a party called New Zealand First that you're gaslighting deserves a fair hearing? I didn't come along to talk about the National Party, the ACT Party, anybody else. I came to talk about a party called New Zealand First, and that's why that hall's full. Now pay attention to a full hall. for the first time.
One of the interesting things, it seems to me, is that the ACT and New Zealand First, a lot of their party policies seem to be reasonably parallel. Yet
Oh, look.
Seymour seems to be very
Excuse me. Imitation's the most sincere form of flattery. You know who the real deal is, don't you? I know you're laughing. Yes, sir. Your turn.
You're not just sitting
Come
there,
election
brother.
time,
Not sitting
if
there,
New Zealand
brother.
First is in a position of a negotiating power, what will you negotiate specifically for Hawke's Bay?
Look, I came down to see the level of damage here and the potential level of costs. And I'm told that their funding has run out on 1 October. I couldn't believe that because it means that in this serious crisis, in the middle of an election, they still have not extracted a commitment to go forward. I've said to them, I've got a grasp of the problem, and I'll seriously not make a promise now, but the Provincial Growth Fund is our idea, and we can see a great cause for it in the future going forward.
New Zealand First has a policy for gang prisons. How are you going to decide where a gang prison will go? Because how are you going to convince?
Well, the prison's there now. Just depute one to be a gang prison. There's 2,000 empty beds. And when they get the hang of it, that crime doesn't pay, they'll stop committing crime.
Right now, if a criminal was arrested in Napier, they have to be taken over to Hastings. Napier only has a satellite police station. Is New Zealand First going to change that? Are they going to?
Well, unlike you and the woke media, I'm concerned about the victim getting justice, not the offender, not the criminal.
So you're
It'll
not
be hard bickies. They'll be going to a gang-only prison, so they can't go on recruiting new membership inside prison.
Mr. Peters, are you going
And the prison officers told me it seriously will work.
on advance voting? Are you going to cast your vote early this election? And what would your message be to other New Zealanders voting? Should they vote early or wait until election day?
My message to the early voters is don't vote until you've heard Winston Peters and New Zealand First.